Annie, how are you?
Hello, Simon. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. I'm a little bit tired, actually, I'll be honest, but I'm doing very, very well. It's a pleasure to chat with you again, Annie. This time live, so no cuts this time. But I think we pretty
Absolutely.
much one cut it last time anyway. So it's a pleasure to have you back on. Annie is a distinguished engineer at Westpac, New Zealand. And Annie, you've had a wondrous career, actually. Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, thanks, Simon. So I've been coding for a long time, but I've been working as a software engineer since, I don't know, just over 20 years now. And I spent the first half of my career as an IC, moving between a whole bunch of different roles, just loving it. And then eventually reluctantly moved into management about halfway through my career. And since then, I've sort of bounced back and forward on the engineer manager pendulum that Charity Majors talks about. And I totally recommend it to everyone who has the opportunity to, because it gives you great perspective from either side.
Yeah, I've done a number of role bounces between kind of like more IC, more management. And I totally agree. It is that pendulum. I do feel that, but it gives you in this talk these wonderful comparisons between this kind of like move from an individual contributor to a manager, and the way you describe this is absolutely wonderful. So without further ado, let me bring your slides up, and I'll pass the
Thanks.
mic to you. Over to you, Annie.
Great. Thank you so much, Simon. All right. Well, thanks everyone for having me. So, my talk today is what I'm calling the software engineer identity crisis. And I think it's something that many developers might start to wonder about now that we're facing this future where we might not be the ones to write the code anymore. So, let's get stuck into it. Although Simon just introduced me there, I thought I might just add that I'm a software engineer and a technical leader, although I refer to myself as a nerd, and I'm very proud to be one. And I'm currently a distinguished engineer at Westpac New Zealand, but I'm also a part-time student at the University of Auckland, where I live here in Auckland, New Zealand, where I'm doing a Masters of Engineering, and I'm focusing on the impact of AI on software engineering. So let's get on with it. I thought I might kick off by explaining a little bit about why this topic matters so much to me. So, I've been writing code since I was a kid. I got this Commodore 64 when I was all of 6 years old, and it came with both of those basic manuals that you see in the picture. And I typed in some of the sample code, and I was absolutely hooked. You see, there's something about programming that, like building things out of thin air, that it just has a really magical feel to it. And I've loved my career as a software engineer, and I've spent years encouraging others to consider it as a career path themselves. But over the last couple of years, I kind of feel like something's been shifting, right? Because as we celebrate how fast we're moving and what's possible now thanks to AI, I'm also wondering what happens to that core of being a software engineer. Because for some of us, it could feel a little bit like a hollowing out, like we might be losing a part of what attracted us to the field in the first place. So I came across this really beautiful quote by Frederick Brooks, the author of the very famous mythical Man Month. And he says, "The programmer, like the poet, works only slightly removed from pure thought stuff. He builds his castles in the air, from air, creating by the exertion of the imagination." Now, I think it captures the magic and power that I've felt when I built my own castles in the air by pure thought and imagination over the years, really, really nicely. Because ultimately, it feels so good to build something that actually is useful to someone, anyone really, that solves a problem in a creative or elegant way. Like you've made a real difference, you know? That moment when it finally builds or the tests pass and you feel like you've done it. It's a really, really nice dopamine hit. But that's not to say that it's always easy, right? So, in fact, quite often it's the opposite. It's almost always harder than it should be. And I think many people are actually turned off by the challenge, but for some of us, it sort of fuels us to keep going. Perhaps we're just suckers for punishment, but the satisfaction of overcoming those hurdles is huge. Even getting your environment set up can be a massive challenge, let alone designing and implementing a solution, ensuring it's reliable and resilient, that it scales well, it performs under load, secure, etc., right? There's a lot to think about because the reality is that software engineering is complex. And over time, we've tried to manage that complexity through specialization. As the demand for software has grown and the complexity has as well, so has our need to divide and conquer. We've introduced product owners to gather requirements, architects to design solutions, quality engineers to test them, platform engineers to run them, security engineers to secure it all. Well, it goes on, right? And the result is that in many organizations that the role of the software engineer has narrowed significantly, not necessarily by accident, but by design. We gave away the upstream and the downstream, and we've held on to the part that others saw as uniquely ours, writing the code. Now, ironically, our industry has even invented a new title, the product engineer, distinct, very different to the software engineer, apparently, for people who still do all the things that software engineers were once trusted to do by default. But now generative AI is here. The genie's out of the bottle, Pandora's box has been opened, and guess what? Turns out it's really, really good at writing code. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's so much better than many of us ever thought would be possible. So by now, I'm sure, and I hope that many of you have played with the various AI coding assistants that are out there. They're really quite incredible, and they're getting better every day. My own aha moment was watching the agentic workflows in Windsurf kick in when I asked it to make a change, and it recognized by itself that it had deleted too much code. It apologized, and then it fixed it, all without me having to lift a finger. Honestly, it feels like magic. But these tools, they're getting so good that CEOs like Anthropic's Dario Amodei are making statements like 90% of the code will be written by AI in the next 6 months, increasing to 100% of the code shortly after that. And Mark Zuckerberg was quoted even more recently saying that he believes AI will soon be better than top coders, eventually becoming smart enough to write most of the code by itself, probably within the next 12 to 18 months. So with comments like these, it's no wonder that many might be starting to wonder whether there's even a role for software engineers anymore. There are lots of posts like these popping up around the internet, and sadly, it's often those who are thinking about what career to choose who are questioning whether it's too late to start a career in software engineering. So, even if you don't believe that software engineering is dead, you might be starting to question what your craft really is now. Like, how do you add value? What's your unique skill set that you can bring to the table, you could take pride in and use to solve real problems? Oh, and earn a good living. These are big, almost existential questions, right? And they've been buzzing around in my mind for a while, so I wrote about it. I wrote this blog post on the software engineering identity crisis a couple of months ago, and wow, I guess I'm not the only one thinking about this, because I've had blogs on and off for a couple of decades now, but honestly, I generally give up because I don't think anyone really cares what I have to say. But this post is different. By far the most popular blog post I've ever written. Some might even say it went viral. I received a bunch of feedback from mostly total strangers thanking me for having written it, and some even shared their story with me. That right there is just a little snippet of a much longer email I got from a total stranger who wanted to share their story and how they're feeling about this change. And the cherry on top, even Charity Majors posted about it. Like, I don't know Charity, but I know of her. And how cool is that? Like, if you don't know who Charity is, please look her up. She's an incredible thought leader in technology. So you see, I've always thought of software engineering as part science. I mean, I did computer science at university and loved it, and part art, because designing software is a really creative discipline. Even when we're working within constraints, there's a lot of room for interpretation. We each bring our own style, thinking, and trade-offs into the design decisions that we make, and there's really rarely just one right way. Other creative disciplines have already pushed back against AI. In early 2024, an illustrator named Beth Spencer created this Created with Human Intelligence badge as a proud celebration of human-made work. And she started a movement which quickly spread across the art community. Writers, photographers, and voice actors, they've all rallied too, protecting the human element of their craft. Now, I'm not saying that software engineers should revolt or rally or even organize the same way, but I think it's natural and understandable if some of us are feeling a bit of an emotional reaction to these changes. Yet, despite the fears, adoption of AI tools to help with software development is surging. It seems that we're a bit more ambivalent than resistant. So back in 2023, GitHub ran a survey with 500 US-based developers, of whom 92% were already using AI coding assistants. And in 2024, Stack Overflow surveyed nearly 61,000 developers, of whom 62% were already using AI in their workflows, with a further 14% planning to use it that year. And the 2025 HackerRank Developer Skills Report, which takes data from the HackerRank platform and the annual developer skills survey that they run, says that 97% of almost 13,500 developers across the globe use at least one AI assistant, but that adoption and use cases do vary across those tools. I mean, given that these tools have only been around for a couple of years, the uptake's really quite impressive, isn't it? Well, the thing is that the benefits of these tools, they're pretty tempting. In my master's research on the impact of AI on software engineering, I ran a survey about 7 months ago, and I got around 160 responses from professional software engineers who are using AI. And 3 major themes of how AI coding assistants are helping software engineers emerged from a thematic analysis of responses to open-ended questions. So the first and most common was time efficiency gains. Like obviously faster development, especially around boilerplate code, prototyping, testing, generally helping us get answers faster. And there's cognitive support. Many developers feel like it's helping them try new things or explaining complex or legacy code, acting as a supportive pair programmer, and in some cases starting to allow us to focus a bit more on higher level tasks like problem definition and system design. We're also seeing some improved flow state because in many ways, AI replaces various traditional tools like Stack Overflow, Google, and documentation, and it can help keep engineers in the IDE, especially if they're using a plugin or an AI native IDE. So those responses to open-ended questions also gave us some really great insights into specific instances where AI coding assistants are significantly helping software engineers. And I thought I might share some of those with you. These are direct quotes from the participants in my survey. So we saw a lot of comments around code generation, especially boilerplate, that cognitive support in the form of a helpful coding buddy or pair programmer. We also see that it helps with problem solving, that technical enablement or exploration of new technologies. It can help reduce that analysis paralysis that you might feel when you're first getting started on a new project. And it's certainly a really good learning aid that can help democratize software development, boosting confidence and helping some people put their hands up for roles that they might not have otherwise. So it's therefore really no surprise that such a high percentage, 84% of participants in my study, felt that AI coding assistants have significantly, or at least improved their perceived productivity. I should note, though, that the participants in my study signed up voluntarily, and as such, we can assume that most of them have either enjoyed using the tools or have some interest in them, so there could be a bit of bias in the data. But I think we can all agree that there are benefits there. So yeah, AI brings with it so many benefits, productivity gains in particular, quite undisputed, and there's plenty of research that backs that up. But we're only just starting to see more research on the other side of the equation. Like, what are we losing? What are the trade-offs? And I worry that we don't really know yet. So one of the things I'm particularly interested in understanding is which of the software development lifecycle tasks we're spending more or less time on because of AI. So as one might expect, participants in my study reported spending significantly less time writing and refactoring code, as well as less time writing tests. We also see a slight increase in time spent reviewing code and debugging it, potentially side effects of being less in control of that code and being needing to review and fix it a bit more often. So if we're spending significantly less time writing and refactoring code, yet we're not spending a huge amount more time reviewing it, are we really sure we understand what we're building? Would we be able to explain it if we needed to? Or do we feel that maybe we won't need to because AI could do that for us too? With the speed that AI can generate code, will we really keep up with all the code reviews? Or are we going to see a decline in attention, otherwise known as vigilance decrement? The truth is that while AI smooths out the terrain for us, we may find ourselves not even noticing what we're stepping over anymore, and that could have some pretty significant consequences. Because AI generally inspires trust because it sounds so confident. It never really signals doubt. And this is a problem because, as we know, it is very non-deterministic in nature and it can have a tendency to hallucinate. And trust in AI works quite differently to trust between humans. With humans, we generally start off with fairly low trust and we build it up through positive interactions with one another. But with AI, it generally starts off quite high because we have these overinflated hopes and dreams, expectations, and the unpredictable nature of its outputs can erode that trust pretty quickly. I'm not saying that AI is bad. In fact, like I said earlier, for me, it honestly feels like magic. But the 2025 Git Clear report, which analyzed 211 million lines of code authored between January of 2020 and December of 2024, shows that we're not just speeding up, we may also be creating a bit more of a mess than we realize. So they found that in 2024 alone, there was a 17.1% increase in copy-pasted code, an 8-fold increase in duplicated code blocks, and a 26% increase in code churn, which is what they define as code that has been authored, pushed to a Git repo, and then reverted or substantially revised within the subsequent 2 weeks. So overall, this report found multiple signs of eroding code quality. So could it be that perhaps we're trusting AI too much, too fast, often without enough critical judgment? And that's where calibrated trust becomes so important. Because honestly, if this is what productivity looks like, maybe we need a better definition. Because I'm quite sure that what we want is faster and more stable deliveries, something which the 2024 State of DevOps report found that is actually on the decline because of AI. The working hypothesis is that what we call increased productivity, that producing code faster, might be part of the problem. It seems we could be shipping larger change sets more quickly. And if you add to that vigilance decrement that we just spoke about, that tendency to pay less attention over time, especially in tasks like code reviews, well, we're seeing quality take a hit. And that creates short-term gains, but at the cost of long-term stability, technical debt that we may not even be noticing until it's too late. So another angle that I think about often is this. The creators of these tools, like the CEO of GitHub, they keep telling us that AI is going to free our time up so that we can spend more time designing high-level architectures, thinking in systems, and focusing on intent, not syntax. But those aren't skills that you can just prompt into existence. They're built over time, through experience, through deliberate practice, through friction, frustration, and even, or perhaps more importantly, failures. In fact, in 1980, two brothers, Stuart and Hubert Dreyfus, came up with the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition to clearly articulate the progression from novice to expert in any given skill. They believed it takes 10 years of hard work, hard varied work, to go from novice to expert in any skill. And with every step, you gain more situational recollection, holistic recognition, intuitive decision-making, and absorbed awareness. I don't think you can just skip these steps by writing better prompts, and I believe that this is the risk we face if we think we can shortcut craftsmanship. Now, the thing is that it's not just GitHub and other AI creators who are saying this. The World Economic Forum agrees. The skills that will matter most in 2023 are things like systems thinking, like the CEO of GitHub mentioned, as well as several other softer skills such as resilience, flexibility, agility, leadership, and social influence. And on the other end of the scale, the skills that they believe are already less essential now and unlikely to increase in use are really fundamental ones like reading, writing, and maths. Oh, and programming. Thankfully, we see that curiosity and lifelong learning remain important skills to harness. This really resonates for me because I've always believed that these are important skills to have, especially for engineers. So if we start to rely too heavily on AI-generated systems without first building our own foundation of judgment, how will we even know if the architecture is solid, if the abstractions make sense, if the system will scale? Those of us who have years of experience in these areas are probably okay for now, but if you've never had to wrestle a system back under control, how will you recognize when things are starting to go wrong? Technical skills take a lot of effort and time to build up, and we can forget them pretty quickly if we don't keep practicing and keeping up to date with progress in our field. And if we become too reliant on AI, we risk our skills eroding, and we might end up becoming operators of output rather than engineers of systems. And that's why we need that calibrated trust, learning to lean on AI when it genuinely benefits us long term, but also knowing when to step back, slow down, and rely on our own judgment instead. So as part of my study, I also collected examples of how professional software engineers perceive that AI coding assistants are impacting their ability to learn. And although there were a lot of positive effects, most of the negative ones centered around over-reliance and skill erosion. I thought I'd share a few more of these direct quotes from our participants with you. So some of us are feeling that by building a bit of a dependency, we're no longer remembering as much, because we tend to optimize for speed and then just end up copying and pasting responses without thinking it through properly, which means that we're not really thinking things through properly and not really understanding it. Over-reliance may also affect the development of problem-solving and technical skills, making some people actually feel a bit dumber, while others are already trying to reduce their dependency on it. So let's face it, if we developers, we take pride in knowing stuff, right? Those magical incantations where the code has to be just right to do what we need it to do. We spend years learning it, getting really good at it, doing leak code exercises so that we can pass some interview. And the thought of losing those skills is really quite unpleasant. All of this reminds me of my own professional identity crisis, what I felt when I moved into engineering management over a decade ago. Honestly, it was the right time for me to step sideways into a different role, but I really didn't want to move away from the code and the tools. I felt like I'd be losing my touch, my edge, the thing that I'd spent so long getting really good at, and that I'd become rusty if I wasn't tinkering every day. Instead, I had to learn to lead and trust my teams to solve the problems and deliver the outcomes that I'd been used to doing myself. In many ways, I felt like I was outsourcing my job and my satisfaction to others, and it honestly didn't feel great. Patrick Dubois recently wrote about the 4 patterns of AI native development that he's been observing and has identified. The first one, from producer to manager, sounds strikingly familiar to my shift from software engineering to engineering management. And he describes the shift from writing code ourselves to reviewing and accepting code, how we're essentially becoming managers of agent development teams, orchestrating and overseeing the production of code by AI. Right, so great, but what now, right? I honestly don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball and I could see how all of this is going to work out, but I don't. However, I do know that we have no option but to learn how to work in this new system. So let's think this through. We can start by reclaiming some of that broader role that we often describe software engineering to include. If you've specialized on writing code, I think it would be a good idea to find opportunities to gain some experience doing those other tasks, like gathering requirements, designing or architecting solutions, creating test strategies, writing automated tests and evals, building DevOps pipelines, running, maintaining, debugging them when they break. These are all really great skills to have, and you learn best by doing. So find opportunities to do them. See if you can be the supply to that never-ending unmet demand. With AI, that specialization that felt necessary to cope with the growing demand and complexity of software engineering may simply not be there anymore. Roles that had been split up among multiple people can be compressed back into fewer with AI supporting the gaps. Now, we're already seeing this play out in many startups where far fewer people are needed to get an idea off the ground by leveraging AI, so this isn't just theory. I also know that with new tech come new tools, new problems, and new solutions, and this is going to require new builders. So we may not write every line of code anymore, but it doesn't mean that we won't be solving problems and building things, which at the end of the day is really what is at the core of being a software engineer, right? So let's think about what these new problem domains that may emerge might be. Prompt engineering is becoming a new core skill. Knowing how to frame problems clearly, guide outputs, and shape systems without writing every line of code manually. This may even promote prompts or specs to first-class citizens, meaning we should start storing them alongside the code that they generate. This might require smarter source control systems, which may also need to cope with an increasing amount of code that's being generated. Then there's learning how to build and run non-deterministic systems and how to test and debug them, and how to delegate authority to AI agents that operate on your behalf without giving them all of your credentials. Imagine what an internet designed for AI might look like, where the traffic is mostly generated by AI-driven interactions. And last but not least, how do we design teams that are made up of both humans and AI agents? What does a high-performance human AI team even look like, and how do we measure collaboration? So there are lots of new problems to start thinking about, and if you're designing and building AI tools or workflows, consider the importance of creativity. Creativity is a really critical aspect of software design. So Google researchers have come up with an idea that they call seamful AI to support both productivity and creativity in software development. As the name implies, rather than making it a seamless experience, we could deliberately highlight the seams because that's where creativity lives and where learning happens. So for example, as we said earlier, Gen AI doesn't signal doubt, but perhaps it could. If it isn't confident in its answer, it should just tell us. That simple act of signaling doubt would allow us to engage our critical judgment, exercise that calibrated trust, rather than just accepting the first answer it gives us. And likewise, if there are multiple possible solutions, it should just tell us and give us the opportunity to choose. And to be kind to our future selves, it could also document and preserve the options that weren't selected, capturing the richness of the decision-making process, not just the final output. During the Industrial Revolution, craftspeople faced a similar moment. Their hands were no longer on the tools, machines had generally taken over. But most people didn't just fade away. They became the ones who designed the factories, fixed the machines, understood the flows, and optimized systems. And I think that's what this moment calls for. We might not touch every file, but we will continue to see and understand the system. So what if awareness becomes part of the new craft? When I first became a manager, I thought I was leaving engineering behind for good, and it hurt. I didn't want to let go of that part of me that built things. But over time, I found my way back. I've swung from IC to leadership and back again multiple times and realized that identity isn't fixed. So why not find your own pendulum and swing between the types of work that you enjoy doing the most? And always remember, your career doesn't have to be a straight line as long as you are always learning and growing new skills. So do I think that software engineering is dead? No, I don't. But it sure ain't going to look like it has in the past. Our industry has changed many times over the years, and this change is a big and meaningful one. But our roles are not disappearing. Our roles are being augmented, and we're evolving in ways that we're only just starting to figure out. But the great thing is that nobody really knows our roles better than we do, what great software engineering looks and feels like. So honestly, there's no one better than us to reimagine what it looks like in this new age of AI. So, are you still a software engineer if you don't write the code yourself? Honestly, I think there are better questions to ask, like, are you still solving problems? Are you still shaping systems and still carrying the craft forward? If so, then yes, I think you're still a software engineer, but just a reimagined one. You don't need to have it all figured out. Just stay curious, keep asking questions, and explore this new landscape. The pendulum will swing and the tools will continue to change, but the essence of our craft, solving, building, and thinking, that's ours to carry forward. All right, that's all, folks. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed that.
That was wonderful. It was a truly, truly lovely session and very eloquently delivered as well. So thank you very, very much, Annie, for a
Thank you,
really
Simon.
important session. We've got a number of questions here. Let's take a look. First of all, why don't we start with a quote? This is a really nice. It was a very nice, eloquent quote as well, talking about lots of technical hurdles, but those are the sand in our boots, and I really like that. I really like that quote, so I kind of
It's
wanted
a
to add
lovely
that
way to
up
put it. Yeah.
first. So Juan asks, do you recommend doing an online master's degree in AI, even if it's asynchronous, which I guess alongside work, or doing it is not necessarily a tool to work in this field? I'm planning to join the master's degree from Texas University. Are you in work at the minute, Juan? Are you doing work? Are you in the trade, as it were, as we're talking? Feel free to go ahead with the question.
Well, from my perspective, I would say any kind of education, self-learning, online master's degrees, or at a university, I think it's worthwhile doing, because you're not just going to learn the material that they teach you, you're going to learn about how to learn about the material that they're teaching you and everything else, right? You'll meet other people. It'll send you down paths that you didn't even know existed. So yes, I would absolutely recommend doing an online master's degree, or just any kind of learning. If AI is a thing that you're interested in, then go for it, Juan.
And if you're already in industry, do you think it's worth any formal education in a kind of AI curriculum role, or sorry, curriculum academic degree or something like that? Or do you feel like a lot of this can kind of like be built on
Yeah,
the role or through courses and things like that? Is
I
it a
think it
new
really
craft?
depends. I think it really depends on the company you work for and the role that you're in. If you're getting lots of opportunities at work to experiment and learn on the job, learning by doing is the best way, absolutely. But
Yeah.
if you're in a role where perhaps you have a lot of day-to-day work to get on with, and it doesn't include much of the stuff that you don't already know, then if you can stand doing 1.5 jobs, or even 2 jobs at the same time, because studying starts to feel like a second job, ask me how I know this, it's worth doing, right? It expands the mind, so I'd say so.
Awesome, cool. We have here's a nice question actually. I've been watching Training Change over my 30+ year career, having been a software trainer early on, but watching that need go away as learning advances from courses, books, Google, Stack Overflow, now Gen AI platforms. The question is, how do you see learning change with AI as a professional in college? What replaces it? In high school, what replaces it? And there's an interesting question that was asked to Gaipo, which was, would you, if you were a student now, go into a computer science degree? And interesting. Oh, sorry, no, it was, would you recommend to your child go into the computer science degree? And interestingly, he said no. And I think the vast reason there was because actually an existing computer science degree doesn't actually represent the needs, or provide the needs as to what that likely future AI role is going, or AI developer role is going to require. What do you feel needs to change in terms of our education at schools to be more adept or equipped for AI development?
Yeah. This is a really great question, and it's actually something that I've started talking to a few other professors at universities and researchers at Google about, and with a bit of luck, we'll be collaborating on a paper about this later in the year. Look, for some time already, I think there's been some criticism of at least tertiary education in computer science, that it's not as relevant as it needs to be for the job. And even when I graduated over 20 years ago, my first job, I didn't put to use any of, like, the tangible skills that I learned at university, but I think it helps you build a foundation that you don't even realize helps. It just helps explain why some of the decisions you make are good decisions. Even if, like, I learned Java and C++ at university, and I've never had a job in either of those. So it's not about learning the syntax so much as those underlying concepts. I mean, I learned how data was stored on a hard drive. I've never been a hardware engineer, but somehow that stuck with me, and it helped me understand maybe I shouldn't, I should put more things in the cache, so it's not writing to disk and reading from disk all the time because it's spinning around so much, and it's things like that. But plenty of people have had very lucrative careers without having had a huge amount of tertiary level education. So moving forwards, and the more we move away from the code itself, like yesterday I was watching a YouTube video and somebody said that they feel like they no longer need to micromanage their code. That's a really interesting way
Nice.
of putting it, because they're not writing it so much anymore because they're really leaning into the vibe coding. So I think the foundations are probably going to change, and maybe some of the principles that we've always known to be true, maybe some of those might change as well. So I
Yeah.
would say it's still worth, pursuing education in these topics, but educators need to move with the times and make sure that they are teaching things that are going to be relevant moving forward.
Yeah. Awesome. Annie, we have minus 90 seconds left. So perhaps in 30 seconds, let's try and tackle Gene Kim's question. Wonderful article and talk. What was the biggest surprise in your analysis of all the responses as people talked about how their work is changing with AI?
My biggest surprise. This is a really great question. I think I was genuinely surprised at how many people feel so strongly about the changes, and yet I hadn't really seen it elsewhere. All I've seen is a lot of either positivity around these new tools are incredible and I can't wait to lean into it, or these tools are never going to replace software engineers or software engineering because they constantly hallucinate. They're always wrong.
Yeah.
And yet there wasn't much about how do you feel about that craft? Like, are you going to miss it? Do you feel like the next generation of developers are not going to have quite the same fun that we did? And there's 50,000 plus people who seem to feel some form of that. And I hope it gives people permission to speak a little more freely about how that makes them feel. The more we talk about it, we can do something about it together. So, yeah, that's a great question.
What a lovely sentiment to end on there as well. Yeah, Annie, thanks once again. Lovely session, really eloquently given, and a lot of things for folks to think about there as well going forward. So thank you
Thank you
for
so much for
joining
having
us.
me.
Absolute
Great.
pleasure.